Well, Letitia James of New York may have broken the very law that she tried to put Trump in jail for the rest of his life with. We've got the continued usurpation of authority from a sitting president from these lower judges. To help me go through all this, I have Robert Gouveia from Watching the Watchers to help me go through that. Robert, thank you for joining me.
Awesome to be here, Stephen. Thanks for having me on.
So I've known Robert for several years now. He's a lawyer that has a brilliant legal mind when it comes to what's going on with President Trump and all of these different legal battles. First thing I want to jump in, Robert, is what is going on with these lower courts telling the President of the United States how he can or cannot rule as the executive of the country, of the military. Let's start with this story of this Judge Boasberg. I mean, this guy is now trying to bring murderers back into the United States. He's trying to tell Trump that he's got to check in with him before he does anything. Your thoughts on this judge?
Well, currently he's one of the biggest pains in the Trump administration's side, I would say, at the moment. He's very conveniently getting assigned pretty important cases. And as you mentioned, one of the big ones was this terrorist Tren de Aragua deportation case. And this judge is the chief judge out of the District of Columbia. So Washington, D.C., it's a cesspool of Democrat and liberal litigation, liberal lawyers ensconced everywhere across Washington, D.C. And this judge is one of them. And when you look into his background, you look into his wife, when you look into his daughter, they're really a Democratic family. And I think it's coming out in a lot of the litigation that we're covering right now. And so the one that you mentioned, this judge literally, okay, Trump comes in, he signs a proclamation under the Alien Enemies Act that is invoked to say that we are being invaded by Tren de Aragua. There is an incursion happening by a foreign gang who's coming in and harming our country. Pretty obvious. We all saw it. Trump got elected for that, right? He talked about this, about deporting these people and about getting rid of the gangs. And so Trump came in with the legitimacy of all of America at his back and then issued this proclamation. Well, the judge, while the proclamation was issued, they were deporting these people out of Texas. And what happened was these ACLU lawyers, we call them the ACLU gangbanger lawyers because they're representing these gangbangers. And there was dozens of them, man, flying in from all over the country, jumping in to defend these gangbangers. And we're thinking to ourselves, this is very strange how they fight so hard for them, but they weren't fighting for the J6ers when they were getting abused by their government, or for the COVID victims when people were getting fired and deported out of their government jobs or out of the military there. So all these lawyers came in and they're trying to support these terrorists, basically, to stop Trump from deporting them. And so they filed, to get into it, they filed a complaint and really a request for what's called a TRO, a temporary restraining order. And the judge got it issued immediately, basically. It was the weirdest thing in the world. So these ACLU lawyers, they're forum shopping. Okay, these terrorists are in Texas. If there's a place to sue go, or file a complaint, go to Texas, file it down there. They didn't. They went to this court, and Judge Boasberg is the chief judge. And conveniently, he got the case assigned to him. And in the middle of the hearing, he certifies the Tren de Aragua as a class. Okay, so like think of it like a class action, right? You see these on TVs. Have you been injured by this drug or whatever? For terrorists, for Tren de Aragua in America. And so certifies them as a class and then orders the Trump administration to turn the planes around in the middle of the court proceeding. And from there, a whole can of worms opened up, but I'll just pause because I know I can dump a lot out there, but there's a lot going on in this case, but that's who we're dealing with. That's this judge. He is ordering the planes of terrorists to come back to America.
Yeah, it's just so crazy to me. I mean, Trump, just in the last couple of days, he put out a Truth Social post where he basically said, wow, Boasberg is randomly assigned a fourth Trump case. What a miracle. Like, I can't believe this. And then you find out he's probably assigning them to himself because he hates Donald Trump so much. Are we going to see the Supreme Court weigh in on whether these lower courts have the right to do something? Or is this the proper legal process? You start at the bottom and you work your way up to the Supreme Court.
Yeah, it's a great question. And there's arguments for both ways, right? You can really go both ways. And Trump has tried both. He's tried to bypass the lower level courts and go directly up to the Supreme Court. And they have kind of rejected him at the moment. They've kicked it back down, and Judge Roberts and Judge Amy Coney Barrett have refused to accept it. And they haven't given us much reason or explanation to it. So we have to speculate and kind of guess as to what they're thinking. When their rejections come, they're just very short orders. But both of those two judges historically have been kind of sticklers for procedure. They want stuff to go up through the proper court of appeals so that they're appropriately briefed and so that everybody can have their say. And when stuff goes to the court of appeals, you do get filings called amicus briefs where different states and different organizations will say, we're friends of the court. We'd like you to hear our perspective on this. And so by the time it gets to the court of appeals, the case is a lot more mature, right? It's very, very well briefed and has been thought about a lot. But the problem with that, from our perspective, is it takes time. It takes sometimes months or years to get all the way up to the Supreme Court. And every time that one of these lower level judges issues a TRO, issues a restraining order, essentially, it's an injunction. They call it a TRO. Generally, TROs are not appealable. So this is where you get into the problem with delays, right? And you heard that phrase, justice delayed is justice denied. And every day that one of these judges usurps Trump's executive power away from him, that's away from the American people. That's undermining our right to have our country governed the way that we want it governed. And so the judges are being extremely sneaky here. Boasberg is another one of them, where the people will file a complaint. They'll act very quickly, like I explained. So these gangbang lawyers file for these terrorists. And then suddenly what happens is the judge certifies them as a class, issues the TRO, orders Trump to return them back. Now that is open to can of worms, because now the judge is saying that you have violated my order to return these terrorists, and might want to pursue that and hold Trump in contempt or issue sanctions, or ultimately lead this up to an impeachment type of proceeding where the Democrats can use that against him. But the Supreme Court could settle all of this. They could come down. There's over 100 cases now flying around in all the different jurisdictions. And these judges just come out and they think that they're the president. They can issue a nationwide injunction from a district court. And by the way, these injunctions are not even affecting only the people in the lawsuit. Okay, so in this deportation case with Boasberg, they sued with about 5 people that were actually a party to the lawsuit. But by the judge certifying a class, it reaches everybody all across the country. And it strips it away from Trump. And of course, that is not what they're allowed to do under the Constitution. The courts can say what the law is, but they don't get to substitute judgment, their judgment, for the president's judgment. Otherwise, that just makes them the president, and they were not elected to do any of that.
Yeah, and that's where myself and my community were very frustrated, because this is what we voted for. We voted to get these criminals out of the country. We voted to close the border. We voted to have Congress revamp immigration. We need immigrants to come in, but we need to know who's coming in. What value do they bring? Are we going to put them on the welfare system for the rest of our life? Are we really going to put illegal immigrants that have been here for 5 minutes on better benefits than our seniors and our veterans? Like, this is what I voted for. This is what my community voted for. So to see these lower courts usurp power from the president of the United States has been very frustrating.
I couldn't agree more from our perspective too, because we're watching these judges, and I'm a lawyer, and we know that these judges in many cases know better than what they're doing, and they're wanting to find an end, and then they reason backwards to accomplish that end, and they just make the law up to support it. And we're seeing it over and over, and it is becoming problematic. And to your point, right, what about the American people? What about the people in your community and my community who voted for this stuff, who fought our butts off to make this happen? And then you have one judge, and in his order, in his decision that just came down, that is basically affirming that he can continue to stop Trump from deporting these people. And there'll be a whole slew of appeals for weeks and months to come. But the judge was saying that these terrorists did not get enough due process before they got deported out. And I'm a criminal defense attorney, and so I'm a big fan of due process, right? It's what we fight over all the time. I love the Constitution. We fight over Fourth, Fifth Amendment all the time, right? And make sure that our government is not encroaching on people's rights and so on. So when I hear due process, it's like, music to my ears. But what I have a question about is, how can people break the law to come in and do danger to the country, do harm to the country, and then suddenly turn around and claim all of the benefits of the protections of our legal system in a way that our own citizens are not getting protected? Okay, so what this judge said, just to kind of cut through the, all of the legalese, is saying before you are allowed Trump to deport these people from the country, you have to give them an individualized hearing in front of a judge, right? So there is due process. So they get in there and they can challenge whether they're Tren de Aragua, they can object to what Trump is doing, and that it needs to be an individualized process. Now, my question, of course, big picture zooming out on that, is what was the process that they gave to us coming in, or that Biden afforded to them coming in? Or did they get a judicial hearing to confirm that these people swear an oath to America, right? Take an allegiance to the country in any way, shape, or form, like other people who are immigrating to this country do when they become citizens? No, they didn't. They just, gave them Uber delivery, basically, into the country with their CBP One app, right? Get on the internet, book a meeting, and your whole family can fly into America. That's the due process that we got. That's the respect that we got as American citizens when we were having our country invaded by others, our own people enabling it. So when we want to deport them and get them out of the country, I think that it's appropriate to have more or less the same process. And that is just somebody from the executive branch signing off on a form, checking off on a box somewhere, just like Joe Biden did when they had all of these people come into the country. So the same process, I think, and with the Alien Enemies Act, gives Trump absolute power to do all of this. And the judges, to my prior point about how sneaky and dishonest they are, really, is they don't have jurisdiction over these things. Like Judge Boasberg should not even be hearing this case at all. And this case went up recently on the Court of Appeals, and there was a dissent. It's still going to work its way up to the Supreme Court, long way to go on it. But there was a dissenting opinion on this, right? So Trump appealed. The judge said, you can't deport these people out of the country anymore. He took it up on appeal. And what's happening repeatedly in all of these different cases, and there's, like I said, hundreds of different lawsuits happening, dozens of different injunctions that have been filed on all different issues, is that these judges, as I said, will spread it all over the place so that the whole country gets impacted by it. And the Court of Appeals then has to take some time to solve that. And it takes sometimes weeks or months. But that happened in this Boasberg case. And there was a dissenting opinion. Trump lost this, but the dissent was very solid. And the dissent said, there is another mechanism by which you can bring this claim. So zooming out a little bit, right? If you're held in confinement, you've heard of this. Everybody's heard of this. You can file a writ for a petition of habeas corpus, right? Show me the body. I am being illegally detained. Every one of these terrorists could have done that. They could have done it in Texas. They didn't want to do it in Texas because they know that they will lose in Texas, and Texas judges aren't going to play the same game that Boasberg plays in DC. So what they do, and this is a pattern in all of these injunctions, is they just wrap it up in constitutional flavor, in constitutional law. Trump's violating the Constitution. So that gives Boasberg jurisdiction over the case when he doesn't have it, right? So what I think ultimately, to go back, very long answer to your important question about what the Supreme Court is going to do. And I think that when they are fully briefed and when all of this stuff is happening in all these various districts, I do think that the Trump administration will be successful in getting this verdict from the Supreme Court, ultimately that puts a stop to this. How that happens is up for debate, but what the judges are doing, they've gone hog wild, and the Supreme Court has to think about the next administration and the next administration after that. And I was joking on our show, heck, man, I might run for or petition to be a judge sometime, and I can issue an injunction for the whole government. Just shut the whole thing down, because apparently judges can do whatever they want. And I'm being facetious, obviously, but this is the problem that we're running into.
Wow. Okay, let me switch gears with you.
Losing weight can feel like an uphill battle, especially with the American diet. From nasty seed oils that hurt us to high fructose corn syrup that makes us even more hungry. Americans have wrecked their gut health. That's where Thermotrim steps in as a smart, science-backed solution. This USA-made fat burner starts by restoring your gut health. Thermotrim has a gut bacteria found in thinner people, but not heavier Americans. Thermotrim helps restore that so you can lose weight. It supports digestion and curbs cravings naturally. Have you tried other products to lose weight and change your gut health? I know I have. For me, Thermotrim is what my body needed. Get Thermotrim to improve your gut health and start losing weight today. Visit redlineremedies.com or snap the QR code. Make sure to use code Gardner to get an additional 20% off. We all feel better when we lose weight, and I want you to live a long and happy life.
Letitia James
Yes.
tries to ruin the business of Donald Trump, the family of Donald Trump, the marriage of Donald Trump, jail him for the rest of his life on Riker Island, where he would have probably been attacked. I mean, bad stuff. Now I'm reading that she may have broken the law when it comes to real estate valuation, that she may have broken the law when it comes to how she has classified her rental properties. I'm reading that she has loans that are bigger than the value of the property, but nobody knows where the money came from. I'm reading that there's clerical errors in her accounting. All of these things is what they tried to destroy Donald J. Trump, the Trump organization with. Tell me what you know about this Letitia James allegations.
Yeah, Letitia is one of the worst. She was the same New York Attorney General who was prosecuting Trump. And then in that trial, Alina Abba, Trump's White House counsel, who's now moving over to the interim attorney for the Eastern District of New York, she was representing Trump there. They had this battle in Judge Engoron's courtroom. And you remember that was the judge with the bonus torso photo. And he was, emailing his listserv photos of his nipples and hashtag bonus torso. Weird court. The whole thing was weird. But Letitia James came in and Alina Abba said she was taking off her shoes, kind of stinking up the whole place, but she didn't really do much in that case other than sit there and act as a political hack, right? Go in front of the cameras and organize her minions to just wage war against President Trump. And she ran for office making statements like that, like she's going to take him out and he's illegitimate and all that stuff. And then she came in and executed on that. And so just as you mentioned, right, you can compare and contrast a lot of what is happening here. Letitia James made allegations about Trump that his properties were misvalued, essentially, right? We remember that $18 million valuation that Engoron said that Mar-a-Lago was worth, and it's not even close, right? It's like we're talking like $1 billion and plus and all those things. So she charged him with fraud, civil fraud crimes, and they were trying to, they got a $500 million judgment on that, and it's currently up on appeal, and she, her office got pretty much reamed and scolded on that case, but that was her whole shtick. It was to try to destroy Trump's entire business empire, and she had the help of the judge to do it. Then we fast forward, and as you mentioned, she's got two properties that we're talking about here. So it's not just one. It's not just one little clerical error, little flub that happened. She's got two properties. One is in Virginia. And as you mentioned, the valuations on this are very strange. Some numbers here. So she bought it in August 2020. So, okay, we flash back kind of during the COVID era. Purchased it in Virginia, and she paid $137,000 for that, okay, which is a pretty nice price for a nice house. She got a mortgage on that for about $109,000, so almost covering. And she designated that, right? Here's where some of the fraud comes in. She called that a second home. Now, if you apply for a mortgage and you call it a second home, the mortgage provider is going to give you different terms, and they're going to consider it differently than if you're turning it into an Airbnb for college parties, right? So if she checks it one way, she'll get different terms of that, which could theoretically save her a bunch of money, get a lower interest rate on your mortgage. And these are the same things she was saying that Trump was doing, trying to get better deals because he was Trump, inflating the value of his property, right? Trying to get better terms from the banks that were giving him the loans to develop New York City, essentially. So then, right, that's how it was labeled. It was labeled as a second home. And then she filed in New York, you have to file a bunch of additional disclosures. And she did that. And then suddenly the classification of the house starts to change, right? So it goes from a second home, then suddenly into an investment property, which is now for generating income. And so there's some discrepancies about, was it ever for a second home? And then on that property, like you mentioned, there were, I think, 2 additional mortgages that she got out on that property, and they were for somewhere between $250,000 to $400,000, right? So now you add all of that up. She already got a mortgage basically for the full property value back in 2020, and now she brings in another, I don't know, maybe $400,000 in new mortgages for a property. And so that means that she's got loans out that is, 250 to 300% over the actual value of the property. And there's a forensic accountant, and his name is Sam Antar. He's been going through this, man, and he's been pulling up the documents all over the place and trying to assemble the timeline. And it's up to Letitia James to explain why that change happened and what those mortgages are for, where that money came from, and whether that is an in-kind contribution or some sort of nefarious funneling of money like we saw with Gold Bar Bob Menendez, right? There's a lot of other allegations in New York. Mayor Adams is currently, going through his shtick there. And that was just one scene. So then we have the other property, which is the Brooklyn property. And this one is also very strange. So if you remember back during the Engeron case, which is the case where Letitia James was prosecuting Trump, she was saying he was inflating square footage of his buildings, right? And they were including some areas that may have not been accessible, or, was like in like a triangle cut off, like, we'll include that, but you can't really walk over there, kind of a thing. So it was just off. And she says that was fraudulent. They were fraudulently inducing banks to give them beneficial loans. And the banks came in and the bank said, first of all, we did our own due diligence on this, and we determined that these are the proper values, right? We don't need Trump's statement of finances to make our loan determinations. We're going to do that ourselves since we're a bank. And Trump, in his financial disclosures, right, said, we disclaim anything in here. This is our opinion. Do your own due diligence. This is our interpretation of the numbers and the facts and the usability and all of this. It's very subjective. And so do your own due diligence. And she prosecuted him for that. She wanted to take away his business for that. And there was nothing done wrong in that at all. In fact, the banks even came back in that trial and they said, we love doing business with him. He was like a whale. They paid their stuff on time. They were very easy to work with. They did business with them for years and years and years. They were not getting screwed. But Letitia made it her entire MO to go and try to take him out. But back to this Brooklyn property. So with that background and that context, then Letitia, she brought this other property called 296 Lafayette in Brooklyn. And it was documented in 2001. This is important, as a 5-family dwelling. Okay, so 5-family dwelling. So it's this property, 5 families can live in there. Purchased 2001, $550,000. But then she reported it as a 4-unit building, right? Now, the certificate of occupancy and other documents say it is a 5-unit building. But why is Tish reporting it as a 4-unit building? Well, there's this thing called a HAMP loan, HAMP, and it's called the Home Affordable Modification Program. And it's limited to 4-unit properties. You get better loans under this deal. So you can drop your loan rates to about 2.7%. And so some of the analysis has been that she's saving $44,000 a year with just a cheaper loan, right? Every year this goes by, and she refuses to answer any questions about this. There have been emails and requests for responses sent into the Department of Buildings in New York. They just say it's a little bit of a mistake, 4 building, 5 building. What's the difference? It matters a lot, right? $44,000 a year.
Well, especially in the context of Trump, right, saying that he changed things in order to get more favorable loan rates. That's exactly what she's done, it sounds like.
It is. And it's even worse than that, right? So maybe she's just filling out another form and just being dishonest on that form, which would be fraud, right? She knows what the building is, and she's the attorney general. And I don't want to skip over that point, by the way. She is the chief law enforcement officer for the entire state. Wall Street's there. Okay. Her finances should be beyond reproach. There should not even be a question about it, about anything like this. And she has to disclose things regularly. But what is being found now is that it looks like people are modifying the documents, or did modify the documents, writing like no less than 6 fam on there to make it ambiguous, to say, well, maybe she was just following the terms of the original document. There's all these handwritten modifications on the papers, essentially, which is now then more, active fraud. You're going back to change the documents to cover up your stuff with ill intent. It's not on the front end, which is bad enough. It's now kind of on the back end as a cover up. And she's not answering any questions about it. You can imagine why, but she, of course, should, because she, they say that phrase, confession through projection, so to speak. I think maybe a lot of people had some questions about her when she was lobbying these cases against the president, but looks like she's doing it. And hopefully there is somebody in New York. The question is, who in New York is going to look into it? Because she's the highest law enforcement officer. The judges don't care. The judges are all in on it. Judge Mercan, Engeron, Southern District of New York is pretty much a joke. So is it going to be Pam Bondi in the Attorney General's office? Is this a federal crime somehow? It's going to be interesting. And the people of New York, apparently, as long as you're a blue Democrat who's going to weaponize your office against Trump, they're good with you.
Yeah. Wow. That is too true. Okay. I wanted to pull up something here. Let me make sure I can do that correctly. There we go. Okay. Let me zoom in here just a little bit. I apologize. Here we go. Okay. So Nick Sorter is an independent journalist in Washington, D.C. He is now saying this same judge, Boasberg, who is trying to block Trump from keeping these violent gang members in El Salvador, is the same one that intentionally delayed the details of Hillary Clinton's email scam until after the 2016 election. And now he's been assigned 4 of the Trump cases. I mean, this just seems very rigged to me. I don't know. Your thoughts?
Yeah, it is a strange situation. And the assignments to Boasberg have been very questionable because he's got an interesting background. So he's been around for a long time. He was appointed by, I believe it was Obama, in 2011. So he's been there for a while. And he also was the chief judge of the FISA court, right? The Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court, where they get access to Americans' private information without warrants through that process in FISA land. So he presided over that. So he's kind of this national security minded judge, right? He was leading that for a while. Then he also was the former chief judge of the Alien Terrorist Removal Court. So within courts, they set these little, like drug court you've heard of, or DUI court, or domestic violence court. Same thing in DC. They've got terrorist removals, foreign intelligence, and all these courts. So this guy has worked there for a while and been the head of both of those courts. And it just feels like he's kind of picking cases that match those titles, right? So now we have a situation. So back during 2016 with Hillary and FISA, Judicial Watch was suing all over the place to get these documents, and they were very successful with a lot of it. But a lot of it they weren't successful with. And this guy was dealing with many of those cases. But now the question is, how is he getting these cases over and over again? And I was looking into this, actually. I was trying to figure out what the court publishes that tells us about this. Is it an algorithm? Is it, spin the wheel and see where it lands type of a thing? What are the exceptions? How can there are certain cases where the chief judge, which is who this guy is, he is now the chief judge of DC, where he can pull cases from them, but it's all very ambiguous. It's kind of like the Google algorithm or something. Like they don't want to tell you exactly how it works because they don't want people to game it. So are we ever going to get clarity on how this judge, and by the way, he's got 2 very big cases now. He's got the Tren de Aragua case, and this is a prickly case because they're trying to impeach Trump, in my opinion. This is where this is going to go, and they're trying to catch him in an impeachment trap. And this is about as close as they've come thus far, because the judge said at that hearing that we were speaking about earlier, when he ordered the planes to turn around, they didn't do that, right? Trump just, nope, they didn't. The planes landed and
international water.
Let them all out. And the judge wanted details on that. When did I give you the order? Where were they? When did the plane take off? When did the plane land? Did the plane make any stops in other countries? Did they refuel? Like everything. And then Trump turned around and invoked state secrets on that, right? Pam Bondi and Tulsi Gabbard and Kash Patel all came out submitted declarations to the judge saying, we're invoking state secrets. You can't have this information. National security is at risk. We're not going to tell you our plane routes and how all of this works. So just, this is not, you're not the president. Okay. We are.
Yeah.
So you don't get that information, but the judge is ordering responses on this. And I think what he's trying to do is to try to catch Trump in a violation of some sort of an order. So then they can come out. They're already screaming about, we're in a constitutional crisis. Chuck Schumer's out there every day whining about our democracy. Like, still, it's like, dude, come up with a new line. It's been 5 years. But
yeah.
when they have a nice opening, when they can say that Trump is, violating a judicial order, then they're going to say we're in a real constitutional crisis. There needs to be impeachment. And as long as the Republicans, I think, control the House and the Senate, we're safe from that. But you know where they want it to go. They want to use that to raise money, use that in the midterm so they can get control of the House again, and then go down that line. And I think it's important for us to have some perspective here. We've been very happy that we've won and we've seen a lot of these changes come down the pike, but we don't want to get too complacent. We want to make sure that these victories are not fleeting and they're ensconced so that we can have our country back, right? We fought hard to get it. And we don't want it to be just something that's taken away.
Yeah. Well, I had Representative Tim Burchett on my show, and he said he's very disappointed in Republicans in Congress because they should be pushing to make these things law while they have a majority, and yet they're not. He said there's just a lot of lazy Republican congressmen and women just collecting a check. Okay, one more thing. I appreciate you coming on. Rasmussen did some polling data from Americans all across the country. And they're saying by a 2-to-1 margin, Americans want Judge Boasberg impeached.
Wow.
I know they're not happy with the judge that's trying to reinstate USAID. I know they're not happy with the liberal judge that's trying to say, hey, transgender men can serve in the military and taxpayer money can be used to cut off their genitals and give them the body that they want, not the body they got. Your thoughts on the Rasmussen data, and isn't it pretty damn difficult to get a judge impeached?
It is. Yeah, it is one strategy that is out there. So you would need the impeachment to happen in the House, and then you would need removal to happen which is 2/3 in the Senate. So you need 2/3 of all the senators to vote to remove that person, which is not going to happen. I mean, right now the Republicans are at 53, I think, so not even anywhere close to 67 that they would need. So you need a bunch of Democrats to come over and actually join in on those impeachment efforts. Now, there is another thesis, okay, there in the Constitution under Article 3 talking about judges. It does say that they enjoy their office during times of good behavior. And then it also gives some provisions for removal. So there is an idea there that maybe that impeachment and removal via impeachment is a very clear process, and it has a number that needs to be hit. But good behavior, the argument would be, you just can remove them with a simple majority vote in both houses. Just pass a House resolution and remove these folks. Now, that hasn't been litigated, to my knowledge, to any satisfaction, whether the Supreme Court would allow a removal via House resolution that doesn't rise to the level of impeachment. But there are a bunch of people submitting impeachment motions. I mean, I've seen, I think, 3 or 4 of them come in so far, going after a lot of the judges that you've already mentioned, which are mostly in D.C. Many of them are foreign born, which is very interesting too. Like Chutkan is from Jamaica. Amir Ali, he's from Ontario. Reyes, the one you talked about, the transgender case, she's from somewhere else too. I forget what country she's from. But it's an interesting thing that's happening. So how do you get control of the judiciary? Do you impeach them? Congress is talking about maybe defunding them. And, Congress has the power of the purse. They could say you can't buy any more printer paper, more printer ink. We don't have to read your crappy opinions anymore. You can't pay for it anymore. So there's a lot of different ways. But I think even if the House impeaches a judge and doesn't remove them, I think that will send a nice message to the judiciary that the American people are sick of it. And if representatives, many of them from around the country, if they have enough energy and support to file these motions, I think that's a good sign, because the judiciary is a co-equal branch of government. They do not run the government. They are not the president. They have a limited, like Venn diagrams, Kamala, they have a limited area of jurisdiction and they're stepping outside of it every day, and it's inappropriate. So the executive branch has within its power, within its rights for Trump to make statements without John Roberts whining about it and saying, don't impugn the judges. If John Roberts got his house in order and ran his judiciary appropriately, Trump wouldn't have to make those claims. Congress wouldn't have to talk about impeaching these people. But John Roberts is not doing anything. So the other co-equal branches of government are well within their rights to actually represent the American people and do what the Constitution says and give us our country back.
Yeah. I just think a lot of Americans are frustrated. They're like, okay, what is the point of voting? Why do we spend tens of millions, billions of dollars to put someone in as president, and then we hamstring them 60 days in to their administration? It's interesting you brought up the foreigner aspect of DC, because Gateway Pundit just put out an article showing that over 30% of all the judges in DC are not foreign-born Americans. They're actually foreigners, and 100% of them had no previous experience as a judge.
Yeah,
that's mind-blowing to me.
It's a wild thing, and this has been a big problem. Yeah, there are 15 judges in Washington, D.C. 5 of them are foreign-born, not from the United States, and they are exercising major power over the entire country. And many of them, like Judge Chutkan, she is from Jamaica, and she was never a judge at all. In fact, she was the judge who presided over the January 6th case, and she's now presiding over the states are suing Trump, all like 18 blue states, Arizona's on the list, a bunch of them, suing to stop Elon, essentially, undo everything that Elon and Doge has done. And she ordered discovery on that case so that the states could go into Elon's, all of his documents and all that stuff. She was never a judge. She used to work for Boies Schiller, which is a private law firm. And Boies Schiller was another law firm that represented Democrats, essentially. It was a Democrat super law firm that represented, I think they were involved in maybe the E. Jean Carroll case or some other big cases, right? Representing Democrats. So she worked there. They shoved her up right into the position of power. And it's the same story with many of them. Judge Amir Ali is from Ontario, no background, comes in, they just shove him in there. It's like this foreign takeover of the District of Columbia. And so people are asking, why do we even need to have the District of Columbia? And if you look back into the history of it, it's not like the Constitution says we're going to have a federal district court in Washington, D.C. It's actually a fairly new development. It's been kicked around between state or basically district level jurisdiction and federal jurisdiction, right? We have state jurisdiction and federal jurisdiction. So the DC's kind of been kicked around. Lincoln got rid of it, when they were way too Southern, and there's a lot of history there. So we're not shackled with this court, and we don't have to buy into this belief that these judges are fair and impartial and neutral and should be afforded a benefit of good faith when they are not. But I would say that I do think that we are winning. I know people are frustrated, and I know every day we come on here and there's a new lawsuit, new TRO. This is happening. Yeah. This is happening. Go, oh my gosh, it's frustrating. We feel it. I feel it. But I think that truthfully, they're in the wrong. I think the Supreme Court is not going to have a choice. Like, there are certain things once they get up there, unless they want the country to break apart, where the judiciary becomes bigger than the executive branch. And I just don't see that from Roberts, even Amy Coney Barrett. I think that they're going to come back, reaffirm a very strong executive, but they're just going to let it marinate and percolate up for a while. But ultimately, I think that a lot of this stuff is going to get settled down. And the silver lining in a lot of this is you have a judge who is telling Trump to turn a terrorist airplane back around. It's like, no wonder that Rasmussen poll is what it is. I can't believe it's not 10-1, But the more I think they continue to interfere with the will of the American people, the more they're going to undermine their own cause and their own efforts. And that's a real big problem for them, because the courts, their only power really is legitimacy, right? They don't have the power of the purse. They don't control a military. So if people stop believing or having faith in the court, then that's a big problem for them and the country. And so they're doing that to themselves. And I think it's becoming pretty transparent you have Boasberg, you've got Beryl Howell, you've got Reyes. These are Democrat hacks, and they are acting like it, and we can see it. So hopefully we can continue to keep talking about this stuff, right? And continue to have these conversations so people can understand what's really happening, and just hang tight. I have a lot of hope. I think that ultimately we're going to ferret a lot of this out and we'll be stronger for it.
Yeah, I completely agree. Robert, I'm going to put a direct link down below so people can find Watching the Watchers on YouTube very easily. If you like getting this deeper legal analysis of what's going on, he is the best on YouTube. Thank you so much for coming on. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, Stephen. I appreciate it, my friend.